right, here we are. This is like the third or fourth podcast I've recorded like in the last day. And I've got another one here this afternoon with Ninja, where we're going to be doing a tabletop role-playing game. So I'm wearing my D&D shirt today for those of you watching on YouTube. And it inspired me to think we don't talk about tabletops enough in IT. It's an important subject because engineers tend to need to be forced into curiosity. We follow the process, we do our thing, and we're really good at, okay, everything's set up, I now set, and I forget. I move on to the next thing, which is fine, but then you stop being curious. So I had to show Skip that scene for those of you who are Ted Lasso fans, of Be Curious, where he's schooling Rupert in darts.
Yes. Yeah.
And if you would be curious, you would find a lot of things out that you made assumptions on. And that's the whole role of a tabletop. So Skip, looks like you have something to say here.
Oh, I love the tabletop exercises. I was probably a good 15 years into my IT career before I actually had an opportunity to participate in one of those. And so I knew about them, it just kind of one of the things that would come up every once in a while, but it was always kind of just that big corporate thing or, the government sort of deal. And yes, I was working for a big corporation. We weren't that big, but we're pretty good size. And they set us down to do a tabletop exercise. Now, it wasn't about IT, all right? I was just a part of it. This oil and gas company had a field that they worked out of that produced a ridiculous amount of H2S, very, very poisonous gas. And so it was led by the safety team. So it was I say all that because it was a very serious tabletop exercise. I mean, literally, we were planning on how to save lives, right? So it was a very, solemn sort of agenda. But I always remember my experience, and I'm just grinning ear to ear, having a great time while we do this because it was so imaginative. It was so creative. So we hired some consultants. You can't do anything without getting some Bobs involved, right? And so we hired them, and they laid out this scenario, and then they just kind of said, okay, here's the scenario. What are you going to do? And we just went around, team by team was like, okay, this has happened. And, we could come back and we go, well, what about this? And we'd have to ask a question. Can I do this? What's the implication of this? And it was a fantastic exercise that we went through. And so I'll probably say it again. I'm really excited about what Adam's got going with Ninja and this exercise they're doing. I think you need to go look it up. If you listen to this podcast, it's already happened. So go look it up, find it. I think this is going to be something that I would see more MSPs doing because this idea of what if, ask those questions, embrace that experience and don't just get focused on closing the tickets. Don't just solve problems. Figure out how to avoid problems. It's really cool.
Yeah. So it's all about like getting onto your team and testing what you know. And finding a way to show that, hey, this thing that we have designed actually works. It actually is going to cover or function the way we want it to. You wouldn't just throw a SQL server in place and then just walk away. You would ask your client, hey, come in, run some queries, see how things are going, see if you can have a actual like query run through and performs well. You would actually have the client use it for a while. And so, every IT person today knows if you do not validate your backups and test your backups, they might as well not exist.
Yes.
There's a saying, and I can't remember what it is, but it's like an untested backup is worthless.
Yep. Because
I have walked into too many situations where somebody had backups. Oh yeah, we'll do our backups. Okay, cool. And then I go find the backups, or either on tape or some form of backup, and I go, these backups are all corrupt. They don't work.
Yeah.
Going back like a year.
Mm-hmm.
So you're crypto locked. Sorry.
Yeah. And I think that is a really, really serious element right now. And the challenges that we're facing is with the ransomware. And how long has this ransomware been lurking? How long has it been, out there messing with your data? And you've really got to stay on top of that.
Yeah, that mean time to discovery. But what the core of where we're going through, so like we know this stuff now, right? We know you should test your backups. We know you should test your servers when you put them in place. You should test your solutions. But how often do IT departments do tabletop exercises, say, hey, look, what if a blizzard were to hit? No, you wait until a blizzard actually hits, and then you find all the holes in your system. Like, oh, crap, we didn't have this. We didn't have that, because you weren't curious. And you made assumptions and you didn't test it. So we all know what a tabletop is. They're easy to run, but I have yet to come into an IT department that runs them regularly as part of their practice. It's like, oh, we know we should be testing our tape backups or our backup process. So we do. We have been burned too many times. And you've learned your lesson. But for some reason, we're not learning our lesson and being curious about our own like MSP or our own IT department. And so what happens is a disaster hits, or, a major, you'll see, like, I've heard stories of these MSPs where they get a crypto locker runs through a lot of their clients all at once, and it puts them dangerously out of business, or it puts them in an uncomfortable spot because they were not prepared to deal with 5 outages at once. So when I worked in an electrical system, one of our things that we did when we looked for IT vendors was, if there is a cybersecurity attack on the United States, there's a major attack that's hitting like 100 companies in the area at once, where are we on your priority list? That was a big question for us. Another big question for us during tabletops was, given that you're in an electrical grid, if there's a major outage going on, what is your employee's first priority going to be? It's their family.
That's right. Yep.
And so if you have a choice between coming into work and working on an electrical grid or helping your family, I'll tell you who's going to get help first. And so part of our DR plan and part of our tabletop exercises was, who is going to take care of Bob or Alice's family and make sure they get to a safe location? And so that way, Bob or Alice, who's like a very key player in our disaster recovery and flipping the network over to an offsite or whatever needs to be done, making those calls, knows that they can make a simple phone call to their family and say, please talk to Jane. She's going to get you over to the bunker or the site. And so these things we discovered when we were doing tabletop exercises. And so it forced curiosity into what people's motivations actually are. And, before I worked at LES, or when I worked at the electrical grid, I never really thought about the extensiveness of a good tabletop and what is discovered. Because I never thought about, in this particular company, if there is an outage, it's going to affect houses and homes and schools and hospitals. So there's going to be a lot of conflicting motivations on who gets prioritized. So when I have my vendor here, and they have 10 customers, and we're only giving them $100,000 a year, and the rest of them are giving them $5 million a year, I'm going to be low on that list of who gets helped first.
Yes. And
so we ask these questions: who is going to get prioritized in a cybersecurity attack that is widespread?
And these exercises may open up some really, really big questions, and you might not be able to solve them, right away. They're more than likely, the answers aren't going to be really simple. But wouldn't you rather be thinking about and working on these problems, to the left of the boom versus the right of the boom, so to speak? So it's a fantastic exercise to go through. And I think a lot of MSPs are feeling it now. You mentioned a few that, had been impacted directly. We've all dealt with customers who've had some sort of cyber breach, right? Yep. But what if you're the source of the cyber breach? And not only has it affected your business, but it's also affected your client's business.
Yeah.
So now you're dealing internally with the problem and externally at your customers at the same time, trying to maintain your business. What happens if, half of your clients get hacked so bad that they can't pay their regular bill? How are you going to pay your staff to, take care of them and you? Those are big questions. And you really need to be thinking about those before you're in a bind.
Yeah.
And tabletop exercises are a fantastic way to run through that.
Yeah. It's a matter of being curious. And if you make the assumption that you are doing everything great and everything you put in place is fine, you're not curious then. You're not understanding these nuances that you never thought of before. You have to wait till somebody tells you, like, oh, you're listening to this podcast. I never really thought about prioritizing families during a disaster situation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you just heard about this. But if you'd done a tabletop, you'd have found it out pretty quickly.
Yep.
And so that's why we do real world scenarios. You try to think of like what was the virus Blaster that came out years ago?
Oh yeah.
And it was a nightmare because if you plugged into a network that had that virus on there, your laptop got infected.
Mm-hmm.
And you had consultants who would take it from site to site.
Yeah.
With them. And okay, you are now responsible for infecting your clients. That client's going to fire you.
Yeah.
Now, what if you had something in place to make sure that laptops could not hop? Or you had a PR piece in place that says, hey, look, it happens from time to time. This was unavoidable. It would happen with any vendor, having a good response ready to go.
Mm-hmm.
That changes how this works. Now, we've experienced these, but you have like that kind of scenario. You can run a tabletop with it. That can be scenario 1. And you come in and no one knows what the scenario is going to be except for whoever's running the tabletop. Okay, guys, a new variant of Blaster came out. It's a 0-day. And roll a dice. Tom, your laptop was infected. What do we have to do now? And you'd be like, oh, crap. So I go to these 4 clients on a daily basis. We need to go out and work with them and notify them. And then, if you want to do an in-depth tabletop, you call your client and say, hey, we're running a tabletop exercise. Just want to let you know, what would you do if we had infected your network with a virus?
Yeah.
And ask them how they would respond to that. I'm like, well, here's what we would expect from you.
Yeah.
Okay. And I'll learn from that. And that way ahead of time, then when it actually does happen, you're like, hey, remember that scenario we ran about 3 years ago?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it happened. Yep. And we took care of it the way that you thought that you told us to. And I think we're going to be okay.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, thank you.
Yeah. So there's two really good proactive points there. One, back to my example of that scenario we did, that safety scenario we did. One of the things that kept coming up was we didn't know what the exposure level was. All right. So the safety guys had this 10-mile radius on the map. All right. And so we were dealing with everything within this 10-mile radius. And there was this really, really small community that sat about, 6 or 7 miles from the gas plant. And so, there were 30 or so people in this little community, really small, very rural. And they were a very, very big concern for us. And it was like, what do we do? Evacuate. This was in the middle of Montana. So middle of Wyoming. So, what happens if it's in the dead of winter? Sometimes the roads are closed, but we can't easily evacuate. All these questions came up. And what ended up happening was a really, really simple solution. Everybody at the gas plant carried these little H2S monitors around. They're really small, kind of like with those radiation badges that they have on nuclear submarines and stuff like that. And so everybody carried those, and somebody said, well, why don't we just pass those out to the 30 or so people in the community, and they can all have one in their house. And it will provide them a sense of assurance, what's going on. They can look at this and know if there's a danger or not. And then based on that, we can make real decisions. If they don't need to get out on the roads in the middle of the night in a blizzard, let's not do that. Let's not create bigger problems, right? Yeah. So it solved that. And so my second point, if you're doing these exercises and you're engaging with your clients, you have those same opportunities. But the other really cool proactive part about that is your clients are going to see that you are working proactively. That's building that trust. I know there's a lot of MSPs and they may not be the best run shops. They're scared to make that call. They're afraid to do that, but you're going to have to get your house in order so that you can make those calls with your client. Say, hey, we know what goes on in the world. We see real-time, events, and we're preparing for those. We're doing the best job possible. And part of that is these proactive exercises that we go through. And that's going to build a lot of trust with your client so that, if it does happen, they're going to feel that you are better prepared than somebody who's just going, oh my gosh, I didn't expect this to happen, right? You're on top of the game. So there's a lot of value in doing these really easy exercises. I know it's time, and that sometimes is the hardest part, but it pays dividends in the future, because not only can you learn things that you would do in an event, but along the way, you're going to make yourselves better just in general. It's going to pay off in left of boom sort of activities as well, because you're just going to be a better run shop.
Yeah. It comes down to the curiosity level. Mm. Like you have to force yourself into curiosity. Like, okay, can you please run your queries on the SQL Server to make sure that it's functioning well for you, that your people can log in? Can you please run this scenario to make sure that, hey guys, can we survive a cyber attack? Can we survive a blizzard? What do we do in the case of, in Midwest area, we have tornadoes. The finger of God comes down and just wipes you out. There's nothing you can do about it. You can just be prepared for a failover. So there's these scenarios you can come up with, and you can look around. A lot of people have them published, or you can make up your own based on real world situations. But it forces your engineers to be curious about what actually happens in the real world when disaster strikes, rather than just always doing a lessons learned. Mm-hmm. So on a good tabletop, you'll have a blank like envelope, and everybody opens it in a scenario there, and you read through like, okay, now Skip has to leave the room. Why? Because Skip is unavailable.
Yeah.
And why is he unavailable? We don't know.
Yeah, nobody can get a hold of him.
Nobody can get a hold of him. Oh, crap. And there's this thing going on. And now you all have to figure it out. So let's work this through. And then after you run through the scenario, you do a lessons learned of, okay, what didn't go well here, guys? What do we need? What actionable items can we do? Sometimes we can't do anything. Mm-hmm. Like, we just now know that this is a big problem. Yeah. That if this happens, so we can't prepare for a tornado. The clients cannot afford offsites. They can't afford a hot site or anything like that. So we're just going to have to rebuild them when it happens. Okay, at least we know. How long does it take to rebuild? Well, it's going to take, from the time the construction starts until we can get our PCs in. That's it. There's nothing you can do about it. But now you kind of know. You can at least set expectations to clients. Like, if this happens, you're down for 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. And the client can at least know. So maybe that's the only thing you do is you notify.
Well, setting expectations is really important. So we ran it was not homegrown, but it was a self-run cloud backup service. I mean, we did it all, soup to nuts. And one of the expectations I learned early on to set with our clients was the restore time. So our sales guys were doing a great job of going out and, providing the value. And yes, we can get all your data back. We can do all this. But what happens when it takes days to restore? Can your business survive without, whatever this function is for 4 days? What if it's 4 business days? What if it runs over the weekend? There's all these different scenarios that we had to think about, and it affected what we sold to clients. So if they were like, no, we can't survive that long, then there were additional layers of services that we could offer to them. And they understood why. It wasn't just someone trying to sell them more and more and more. They understood, oh, yeah, that was a really good price on backup, but that was a 2-week restore time. That doesn't work for my business, And so we do all these different things that the clients understand. And when they understand how it impacts their business, they're going to be much more engaged on that. And they're much, much more likely to spend money on it because they realize the value that it brings to their business.
Yeah, it's hard, and it's fun, and it's scary because you start discovering things. But then you can also, as Skip said, you can bring value to your customer's business. You can identify things like, hey, if this happens, then you're down. And they might say, oh, well, maybe we need to create a contingency plan for that. So if this scenario happens, we can let our customers know, like, hey, we have a plan in place. It's like, we're all going to work from home. Response times are going to be a little bit slower in the meantime, blah, blah, blah. But they have a plan.
Well, I'll never forget. So one of our members down in, I believe it was in Australia, they had a tabletop exercise run, and it was more centered around the avian bird flu that was, I don't know, late 2016, 17, 18, something like that. And they had done a tabletop exercise that ran through this scenario. And a few of the people kind of rolled their eyes like, it's not going to be that bad. But the outcome was that we need to be able to enable people to work from home. And it was a large organization, plenty of money. So they were like, oh, so we'll just buy some extra machines and have them sitting on the shelf. All right. And a lot of people in the organization thought that's kind of a waste, but whatever. Right. And so they'd kicked off this process, and they had machines, monitors, keyboards, they had them in boxes, and they were sitting on a shelf, and they had a recurring ticket so that someone from IT went over there, pulled these things out every, I don't know, it was 3 or 6 months, plugged them in, made sure they were running good, made sure they had all the patches, up, and then put them back on the shelf. And people are like, okay, whatever. Sure enough, COVID hits. All right. And this company, whoever came up with this plan is just sitting there with this big grin on their face. Not about the events that are happening in the world, but about their plan, because they called employees and said, hey, swing by the distribution center and pick up your remote work kit. And people walked out with this big box that had a monitor and PC and all this stuff. And they took it home and set it up and worked. While so many other people were facing all these challenges, these people were very well prepared, and it was much less of an event. So, there's a lot of value that can come out of these. You look really good when these work out, but you will feel even better beforehand because you will feel prepared. And that feeling is going to, trust is in essence an emotion. Right? And not entirely, I get that, but you can build that trust with your clients by going through these exercises, and they will feel that you have them covered, that you can take care of this and help them through these challenges, whether it's with you or just them specifically. They're going to feel that you're better prepared.
Yeah. And that comes down to, once again, curiosity. You should always be curious about your customers. You should be curious about whether you're doing the right thing. And if you do that, if you're always staying curious, you're always learning, you're always discovering things. And you will have engineers. You have people who are really good at troubleshooting, but they need to ask a question. They need to know the question to answer. They need to know the scenario to cover. So they can come up with clever solutions like Skip mentioned. And so tabletops, today I'm excited for this tabletop. I'm excited for what I will learn. Adam the Graybeard. I got my card just the other day.
Yeah, I knew I was going to say it again.
I'm excited for this. I know that it'll already have gone on by the time this podcast airs. And then the other thing you guys all need to know is April marks a very significant date for us. Do you know what it is, Skip?
No, I've not.
As of April 29th, this podcast will have been running for 4 years straight.
Oh, hey, that's cool.
Yep. 4-year anniversary. So
all right.
I'll do an anniversary episode for April 29th.
Oh, that'll be good. That'll be really good.
Yep. Yeah, we can go back to the best of.
Oh, no, we're not doing this. No, we're not doing this.
I'll stitch one together. The best systems of the last 4 years.
Oh, I shudder at that one. So, no.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us on the podcast. We will see you next time.
See ya.